Johnny Carson caught these stars lying on live television. They referred to him as the king of late night, a man with a quick mind, quicker instincts, and a sixth sense that could tell if someone was lying. Johnny Carson was more than a host. He was a human lie detector hidden behind a disarming smile and a microphone. For 30 years, Carson dominated The Tonight Show, making each celebrity interview a dance of laughter, of curiosity, of sometimes revelation. He never raised his voice. He never accused. He simply listened, and when someone attempted to twist the facts, Johnny had a talent for revealing the truth without ever sweating. These are the times when Hollywood's most glamorous stars sat across from him, spun their stories, and found themselves quietly and wonderfully ensnared. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. 1. Tony Curtis, The Age Lie. It began innocently enough. Tony Curtis, the iconic matinee idol, sat down with Johnny, dazzling as ever with that movie star smile. But when Carson matter-of-factly asked his age, the room felt as if it held its breath. Curtis gave a disarming smile and professed to be in his mid-40s. The crowd applauded politely. They wanted to be taken in. But Johnny wasn't. His eyebrow went up just a notch. Mid-40s, you say? That would make you a teenager in Some Like It Hot, he said, as if he were doing math. The crowd chuckled. Curtis chuckled too loudly. Off-camera, Carson's team had worked their magic. Tony was nearing 60, not 40, but Carson didn't humiliate him. He allowed the joke to linger. It hung there like perfume, tantalizing, unmistakable, yet never unkind. It was a lesson in restraint. Carson didn't have to go toe-to-toe, he merely had to suggest. 2. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the make-believe royal. When Zsa Zsa Gabor swept onto Johnny's show, she strode like a queen. Literally. Clad in jewels, swathed in fur, and talking in that rich, showy Hungarian accent, she firmly declared herself royalty. "Darling, you see, I am from Hungarian nobility," she announced. Johnny cocked his head. "Hungarian nobility?" he echoed, smiling. "Yes, naturally. My family is royal," she asserted firmly. Carson relaxed, his face genial but playful. "That's a joke," he said, "because if you're Hungarian royalty, I must be the king of Nebraska." The studio exploded. Zsa Zsa's lips compressed into a smile, but there was a flash of hurt in her eyes. She laughed, but it was the sort of laugh people use to conceal a bruise. Later, the tabloids went wild with rumor. Was she really a countess? It turns out, sort of. The reality was that Zsa Zsa's royal credentials derived from her father's self-awarded titles. Johnny was aware of it, and in his own way, so was the audience. 3. Ed McMahon, the salary bluff. Other times, the fibber wasn't even a contestant. Johnny's sidekick, Ed McMahon, was a regular on The Tonight Show. As a team, they were America's go-to-late-night tandem, the perfect combination of humor and warmth. But on one night, when Johnny playfully inquired about Ed's recent big paycheck from a new commercial endorsement contract, Ed puffed himself up. "Oh, Johnny," he guffawed, "let's just say it's in the six figures." The audience applauded, and Ed chuckled, relishing the spotlight. Carson, however, wasn't deceived. "Six figures, eh? Well, if you're making that much, perhaps you can pay for the drinks tonight," he joked. The smile disappeared, a fleeting one, before Ed regained himself. Production sources later would verify that Ed's six-figures statement was optimistic, but Johnny never followed through. Instead, he wrapped up the bit in his familiar smile. "That's the thing with numbers, Ed. They always do look smaller after taxes." The crowd erupted, and the moment was over, but Johnny had made his point. 4. Truman Capote, the sobriety story. There was a period when Truman Capote was America's most glamorous author, brilliant, quirky, and off the wall. When he sat on The Tonight Show, his low-key suaveness dominated the atmosphere. Johnny welcomed him with a warm smile, inquiring about his recent work. Truman smiled innocently and swore that he was completely sober now and toiling tirelessly on his next magnum opus. Carson's face didn't change. He nodded graciously, but his eyes, they told everything. Before long, Capote's slurred speech and rambling anecdotes revealed the truth. The audience chuckled awkwardly as Johnny attempted to keep the interview afloat, steering the subject delicately away from catastrophe. Once, Carson leaned forward and whispered dryly, "Truman, I believe your coffee's got a bit too much imagination in it." Even Capote laughed, and the tension was broken for a moment. But when the cameras weren't rolling, Johnny's patience thinned out. It wasn't judgment, it was disappointment. He'd hoped to assist, not embarrass. That night became one of those haunting reminders. Sometimes the truth comes out, even without a question. 5. Madonna, The Innocence Act. It was the 1980s, and Madonna was already rewriting the rules of fame. She strutted onto Carson's set in lace gloves and defiance, claiming she was still a good Catholic girl at heart. Johnny chuckled. "Good Catholic girl, huh? That must have been before the music videos." The audience erupted with laughter. Madonna smirked. "I'm just expressing myself," she said, flipping her hair. Carson leaned forward, his tone playful but exact. "So, when you were rolling around the stage in a bridal dress, singing like a virgin, that was religious expression?" For a fleeting moment, Madonna's confidence was shaken. She laughed, but the flush betrayed her. Johnny smiled, not taunting, just amused. He wasn't there to embarrass her. He just recognized the act when he saw one. And that was Johnny's present, understanding people, not their words. 6. Joan Rivers, The Friendship Fiction. Few individuals had a more entangled history with Johnny Carson than Joan Rivers. She began as his protégée, the girl he advocated for, the one whom he insisted would go places. Then she went and launched her own talk show. When she returned, years later as a visitor, she insisted that she and Johnny patch things up. She said it firmly, but the silence from Johnny spoke volumes. He smiled charmingly. "Oh, did we?" he murmured. The audience laughed, but the tension was so thick you could cut it. Rivers backed down, made it into a joke. "Well, at least I thought we did." Johnny let the moment linger. "Joan," he said, his tone calm but sharp, "I think you're confusing forgiveness with forgetfulness. It wasn't cruel. It was truth, delivered with a smile, but heavy enough to make the world take notice." 7. Robert Blake, The Alibi Story. Robert Blake had a fierce on-screen presence and a volatile temper. When he interviewed with Johnny, the host asked nonchalantly about a reported incident on the set when Blake had stormed off after a fight. "Oh, that? Complete rubbish," Blake dismissed, brushing it away. "People invent tales." Johnny nodded in a slow, skeptical way. "Odd," he said, "because our producer told him he had to chase you across the parking lot." The crowd erupted into laughter. Blake didn't. For an instant, he stood frozen, his face tight, with tension, before attempting a weak smile. "Well, perhaps I just needed a bit of fresh air." Carson didn't press on, but the public was aware. And years down the line, when Blake was embroiled in more sinister headlines, that interview would come back to haunt him as an ominous premonition. The evening Johnny Carson pierced a man's facade way ahead of the rest of the world. 8. Chuck Berry, The Clean Image. When rock legend Chuck Berry appeared on the show, he spoke passionately about his clean lifestyle. He said he'd given up wild touring life and was focusing on mentoring young musicians. Johnny smiled, intrigued. "That's great, Chuck. So you're saying you've retired from the rock and roll chaos?" "Completely," Berry said proudly. A few minutes later, one of Carson's producers blurted backstage that Berry had shown up late due to a crazy party the previous night. Johnny didn't bat an eyelash. "So, Chuck," he interrupted during an interview, "how's retirement going for you? Late nights, loud music, and a little too much mentoring?" Berry chuckled nervously as the crowd laughed out loud. He'd been caught, but Johnny was lenient. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about the truth, served up with humor and grace. What set Johnny Carson apart wasn't his fame or his riches, or even his comedic talent. It was his instinct. He had a clear sight through pretension like a pane of glass. Celebrities appeared on The Tonight Show to plug their movies, books, or images, but Johnny? He appeared to unveil the individual. He never yelled, never blamed, and never had to establish that he was correct. The facts always came out on their own around him. He made it appear as though it was a losing proposition to lie on live TV. Not because he revealed it brutally, but because he did it tastefully. In an age where celebrities constructed entire careers on image, Carson brought the world back to the realization that authenticity reigns, and that at times a raised eyebrow and a knowing smile might convey a truth louder than any newspaper headline ever could.